we've managed to set up connection with Milano, and Milano is here at Crossing Border Festival. Welcome, Mr. Scurati, at Crossing Border Festival. It's such a pity we cannot receive you here in person, but I'm very glad we've been able to set up this connection. How are you actually doing in Milan at this moment? As I understand, you are experiencing a new lockdown as of now.
Yeah, well, good evening to everyone. Yes, as a matter of fact, we are experiencing a new lockdown, and we are very worried because this time Milano is the center of the pandemic, and many people we know are sick, and the hospitals are crowded, and it's going very bad. And there's nothing else to say besides that we'll do our best, just like we've done in the last March or April, February. But we're back again to the same point, maybe worse than the first wave.
But how is it for you currently as a writer, as you have written your first book of a series about Mussolini, and you're set on to write 3 more books? Are you able to concentrate and work on that?
Well, okay, let's get this one straight. Should we keep doing this in English or?
No, I'm very happy if you would answer in Italian, and you will be translated into Dutch.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, somebody tells me now we're supposed to continue in English, if you would.
Okay.
And if it's too hard for you to explain things, then the translator will interfere.
Okay, I will try. My English is not as good as it used to be when I was younger, but I will try.
Thank you so much.
Well, most of my friends, writers and intellectuals, they told me that during the first lockdown in last spring and last winter, they were not able to write anything, but they also were not able to read. I've heard many people, professional of writing and common people, who told me I cannot read a book. I cannot concentrate, and they used to watch TV series mainly, but myself, I kept writing. I must say, the second volume of M, which is being released in Italy the last month, I finished writing it during the lockdown. I would walk out of my house and walk to my studio, which is not far, it's like 500 meters, and close myself in there. And I don't know, it's something crazy, but I felt that keeping on writing about what happened in Italy 100 years ago, with the fascists gaining power and with all that tragedy that brought with it, and telling to the new generation and even the old generation what awful thing was fascism, it was kind of my contribution to fight the pandemic. I know it's come si dice, un cortocircuito, but that's what I felt, and that's why I went on writing.
Can you tell me where your fascination with this era started, and when you decided to write this series of novels about Mussolini?
Well, yeah, I was never fascinated by Mussolini and fascists in all my life. I was always fascinated by anti-fascists, by partigiani, I would call it in Italian, by the man and the woman, maybe we should say the women and the man who fought against fascism. I belong to maybe the last generation of the last century was educated in the principles and now maybe values and ideas and narratives of resistenza, of anti-fascism. Mm-hmm. And ever since I was a kid, and I dreamt to become a writer, a novelist. Well, at the time I used to write poetry, but I've always dreamt of writing a book about partigiano, someone who fought against fascism. And I always asked to my mother to tell me the story of my grandfather, who was born in Naples, and he was not a fascist, but he admired Mussolini, as millions of Italians did. But he was a good man. He never hurt anybody. He never wore a black skirt. He was just an humble man with 7 kids in Naples, very poor city. But when he got to the point where he had to decide what to do, and the Allies were at the doors, at the gates of Naples, and Naples was occupied by the Nazi German SS, he decides to fight on the right side. No, he climbed up to the roofs of his house, and he started shooting on the German occupation troops. And he fought in those who we know as the 4 days of Naples, when the city insurged against the Nazis. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to write that kind of book about my grandfather, about the anti-fascist fighters, and I did because my preview novel, which is called Best Time of Our Life, it's the story of a hero of what happened, of anti-fascism. Mm-hmm. Okay, mingle with the story of my grandfather. Yeah. But while I was doing research to write that book, one day I saw this how you call that, this movie, questo repertorio, questo documentario, Mussolini speaking to the crowds from the balcony of Palazzo Venezia in Rome. Now, very famous images, and when he goes like that, and so this very famous video of Mussolini speaking to the crowds from the balcony of Palazzo Venezia, and I told myself, God, nobody has ever told this. And of course, I knew that there were thousands of books, of essays, yes, historical books about Mussolini.
I would assume so, yes.
Yeah, but what it was never done was to write a novel about Mussolini and to tell the fascism from inside by means of the form of the novel, which is something very different from, as we all know, from essays and historical books.
Mm-hmm. What's so interesting is that you start the novel with a disclaimer that this is a novel based upon real facts, documented facts. So normally a novel would start with everything is invented and nothing can be related to persons in real life, but here it's the other way around.
Yes. Here there is an anti-disclaimer in which I say nothing is invented. You see, because the challenge was very high and very, very challenging, of course, and very dangerous. As I told before, I come from an anti-fascist culture, and I didn't want to make of Mussolini a kind of a tragic hero, someone you could empathize with. Yeah. No, I didn't want that. And so I told to myself, I believe that fascism, and of course Nazism and all kind of totalitarianism, it's been an evil. Okay, if I tell this story by sticking to the facts, okay, and by
so the connection is interrupted again. So we have to wait to reconnect.
And so I was saying that I was sure that if I could do the both things, stuck to the facts and using the good means of the novelist to involve people and say to everyone, here, come, the door is open. You don't need to have a bachelor in history to understand what fascism has been. You can participate you can join the knowledge of history and of human experience that comes from literature, no matter who you are, whoever you are, even if you didn't study. And at the end, of the reading, not at the beginning, the readers would enforce their anti-fascist and democratic beliefs.
But as you say, it is a dangerous subject, and I think maybe. Has it been really hard on you? Because the first book took 5 years to write. So for 5 years, you've entered into the head, almost into the body of Benito Mussolini, of becoming him, thinking like him, writing like him. How was that for you?
Well, it was hard stuff. It took a lot of studying. Well, I'm also a scholar. I'm a researcher. I'm not an historian. I studied philosophy and literary theory, but I had to study and to read all the books I was able to. But also I had to split myself in two persons. That always happens when you write a novel. Okay, Tolstoy once said, before I started writing Anna Karenina, I hated her. Okay, because she was a female adultera, come si dice? Adultery.
Yes,
adulteress.
Yeah.
Adulteress.
Thank you. And he was a man from 19th century, and a very macho and masculista and misogyno. But then he discovered, he found out how to love her by he was writing her, inventing her. That's why I said Tolstoy. But that could not happen to me. I didn't want that to happen.
That's what I meant.
Yeah, and so I had to split myself in two and trying to think like Mussolini did and to write like Mussolini did. Because one thing about this book is that there is no free invention. So every time that Mussolini talks, he talks with his own words. Every time that Mussolini feels some things or thinks about his sights on the world is written through his own words. I had to read all his opera omnia, all his books, all his speeches, all his articles, and there are plenty of it.
Yeah, you also include them part of them in the book to resonate with the interior monologue.
Yes. The interior monologue are built out of his own words, of course. Mm-hmm. I'm the writer, okay? I have the last word in some way. And so it was a matter of accents, Every time I wanted to have him speak with his own words because I wanted not fiction, but to have the reader to write in a way that the reader could hear the uncanny, scaring echo of Mussolini's words, And at the end, I was a kind of schizophrenic, okay, myself. And as a matter of fact, I wasn't feeling very, very, very well at the end of the 5 years work. But I caught up after.
Mm-hmm. As you describe Mussolini, he's kind of charismatic and very ambitious and energetic. But he's also an extreme manipulative person. Is your book also a warning? Because I can see a mirror in current times with the rising of right-wing populism throughout the world. And in a way, this resonates in the era that you describe.
Yes, yes. We just got rid of one of them, I
Yes.
hope. Yeah.
As you talk
And one of,
about Donald Trump.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. Yes, Mussolini was all these things. He was very clever. He was very fascinating, very seductive, very manipulating. He was not a joke. Like too many times we have depicted him, like something a clown or a funny. No, he was a very clever man who had the insight of what politics was going to be in the era of masses as a first. One thing he understood is that politics in the era of masses could follow two different paths. The first path was the one he came from, the one of socialism. The main idea of socialism was hope. Socialism was the party, the movement, the politics of hope. A rising sun was the symbol of socialism. Tomorrow will be better than today. My son's life will be better than mine. The justice will come tomorrow, if not tomorrow, the day after tomorrow. Okay, but Mussolini came from there, and he was kicked out of the Socialist Party.
Yes.
So after the war, okay, he understood one terrible truth about politics in the era of masses, that there is one political passion even more strong than hope, and that passion is fear. And so he bet all his money on fear, on resentment, on anger, on sense of betrayal or sense of jeopardy of being under minaccia. Threat. Yes. And those feelings were very well widely spread among Italians and Europeans after World War I. The small bourgeoisie was afraid from socialist revolution. Yeah. What was hope for them was fear for the small bourgeoisie and the grand bourgeoisie.
And Mussolini used the veterans that were rampant and empty-handed to install this fear in a very blunt way.
Yes. His first followers was the veterans of First World War, but not just any of them, was the Arditi. The Arditi, they were the commando troop of World War I, and they were professional of violence. And they were worshipped during the war, because the propaganda worshipped them. And then they were dumped after the end of the war. And Mussolini hired them, said, okay, follow me. I'll be your leader. And those were the first. And then they started to show us how violence could be a solution, And they started, so Mussolini started to disprezzare, come si dice?
Misprice.
To misprice democracy, the democratic institution, the parliament that was never able to solve the questions, the problems. And we've heard so much of this in the last years, misprising of democracy, of parliament, of all this, And the words the propaganda the Mussolini used against the democracy in the 20s of the last centuries are the same words that populist leaders, sovereignist leaders are using in the 20s of the next centuries. They begin by misprising the parliament, the democracy, the old mummies of the parliament. And the next step is to say, we don't need all that. I am the people.
Is that also a reason that you included all these documents and also described the sides, all the different sides of the actors in his day and age, as to oppose this to the fake news mentality.
Yes, yes. I choose to publish many documents, and then so when you read the book, you can read my writing, my way to tell those facts, and telling that, as I said before, is built with the stones of their own words, their own facts, their own feelings. And then, besides that, you can find at the end of every chapter, a very small chapter, at the top, the original documents.
Yes.
And it's amazing by reading these documents, to find out that people who they did not understand their own lives. Like you see that the fascists, are marching on Rome, and in the same day, one of the most brilliant philosophers of Italy, Benedetto Croce, he still believes that fascists, they're not a real danger, and they're marching on Rome. And you say, how come? How is it possible that one of the smartest minds in Italy of those days did not understand that that was the end of his world? He was a liberal, And then you look besides you in these days, and you say the same thing. You say, how come? Is it possible that a president of the United States come si dice? Ritira la firma dagli accordi di Parigi per il cambiamento climatico.
Takes his signature away on the agreement against climate change. How is it possible that the president of the state takes his signatures away?
Doesn't he see that the climate change is the main danger of our time? And that's what you find out, that the blindness of people to their own lives, and that's moving.
And you also see how he builds up all these kinds of alliances, and meanwhile trading these alliances, being traitor to his friends, his first connections, trading them in for new connections, making one of his allies to his total opposition, and even killing his opposition. How did you manage to level all this in this first part of the series?
Well, I don't know how I managed, but someone says that I did it. What I want to point out is
did you say that?
saying.
Sorry, I interrupt you, but did somebody say you did not manage to balance?
No. Someone says that I did it.
You did, yes.
I don't know how I managed, but no, I wanted to point out what you were saying. That's very important. That I think something new about the portrait of Mussolini that comes out from this novel, that Mussolini is an empty man, and a hollow man. Mm-hmm. We're used to think of Mussolini and Hitler and Stalin as a very full of ideology and doctrine and ideas of what a man should be, what a nation should be. But if you get to the beginning, in the 20s, when he settled the first novel, you see that Mussolini had no ideas of his own. He had no political programs. He wrote a program, but then he was the first one who said that's dumb. Okay, we can throw it away. He had no nothing he believed into. He had no loyalties. He was ready to betray anyone to change his mind every time, following the opportunities. Because he was a hollow man, okay? Mm-hmm. But that is the reason of his success. That's his main strength as a new kind of politician, because that hollow man, you know, who has no ideas of his own, no strategy, no programs, he can smell the air, you know, he can smell the crowds, the humori, the feeling of the people, and he empty himself of that anger, of that irrational feelings, and then he blows on it, you know, like a spark that becomes a fire, and that is the populist leader. You know, is the kind of leader who can lead the masses by not staying in front of them, he can manipulate the masses by not leading them, but by following them. Mm-hmm. He's always one step behind them, and hearing and smelling and feeling, you know, and echoing what they feel, what they fear. You know, Mussolini used to say about himself, "I'm the man that comes after, okay, mm-hmm. not before, just one step behind the crowds."
You also include his personal correspondence with a lot of people. What struck you most about these personal writings?
Well, many things. In his personal writings to, for instance, to Margherita Sarfatti, who was maybe the only woman he loved.
His mistress, yes.
His mistress, yes. He had many mistresses, but Margherita Sarfatti was was the only woman who counts in his life, because she was very well educated. She was an intellectual art critic, and she had a role very important in the uprising of Mussolini, and he could be even delicate with her, very very romantic, and then betrayed her in the best way you can imagine. And then there's something amazing in the second volumes when he writes to his own daughter, okay, Edda. He had many sons and daughters, but the only one he loved very much was his first daughter, Edda, who was born when he used to call her the daughter of, come si dice, la figlia della miseria.
The daughter of misery.
Yeah, because she was born when they were very poor, and so he was always so tied to her, and she had his own character. And well, he writes a letter to this very beloved daughter to give her advices about she's grown up, and he gives her advices. He doesn't want her to smoke, okay, because she smokes, she drinks. And at the end of this letter, when this father who loves very much her daughter gives her advices to take care of herself, when he gets to the signature, he writes Mussolini. Not your father, not Benito, he writes Mussolini. Like if he was writing to the chief of state, yes, of the foreign country, and that's I think amazing. Now you write to your daughter and you use your last name.
Yeah, that's really striking.
Yeah, striking.
So this is in the second volume that has been published.
Yeah, that's in the second volume. You must wait for the second volume.
Yes.
But the publisher Podium, which I want to thank here, because it was one of the first. I think this book is being translated in 40 foreign countries, 40
countries,
which are,
yes,
the first country at all. Now I'm getting tired. The first of all No, among these 40 countries in which it was published was Netherlands. So I'm very grateful to Podium Publishing.
Did you ever foresee that this book would be published in 40 countries? Because when I was reading it, it's a history that's vaguely known to me, and now I've delved into it and learned a lot about Italy from your book. And I can imagine that in Italy, this is much more a lively discussion still. So I find it really interesting that this book has gotten to such a big audience to learn about Mussolini.
Yes, no, I could not foresee in any way that the success of this book, and so I'm very glad of it, of course, and amazed and puzzled sometimes. I ask to myself, how come? But at the end of it, you see, it's a novel. It talks about human condition. It's the human condition.
Yes.
It's not an historical book. It's not an essay. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes, I was thinking it's a very universal book about wanting to get power and rise to power. And because of its reflections in current times, as we just spoke about Donald Trump, but also there's Putin, there are many more leaders, even in the Netherlands, who are rising with this same hollowness and catching up on sentiments that are rampant in the countries. So maybe that's one of the reasons that this story is taken up by so many countries.
Yes, sure. That's one of it's a sociological explanation. It's of course it's a good one. In Italy was a huge success, but I know that many readers use this book as a kind of cognitive map to read our present. So many politicians use this book in the same way. I know, because they write to me even if I don't know them. And so there is a mirroring with yeah.
Sorry, politicians write to you about this book.
Yes, they want to meet me, like if I could be a spin doctor or something like that, because the mirroring is so strong, and that they use the book as a kind of vademecum to decide what to do, and of course democracy in these days is again in danger. You see, I was wondering. I was thinking yesterday after the news about the fact that Biden was the new president of the United States. I was thinking that, you see, democracy, liberal democracy as we know it, it's very late and very small experiment in human history. It's something that in Italy, but even elsewhere, was born at the end of the Second World War. Vabbè, continuo in italiano perché adesso inizio ad essere stanco. È nata in Europa alla fine della Seconda Guerra Mondiale e ha raggiunto l'Europa occidentale e il Nord America, quindi un pezzo piuttosto piccolo di mondo. La democrazia liberale. Mi sente?
Yeah. Liberal democracy was born in Europe after the Second World War, and it reached the Europe and the United States of America, but so a small part of the world, actually.
Yeah.
ed è fragile, è un esperimento luminoso, meraviglioso, ma molto fragile, molto recente e molto fragile.
It's a beautiful experiment, but it's very fragile. It's gives enlightening, but it's fragile.
Yes. I have a question for you from one of the people watching our live stream. It's Victoria. She wants to ask you if you would ever want to go into politics yourself.
No, Vittoria, ero stato tentato alle scorse elezioni europee, perché mi sta molto a cuore il destino dell'Europa come comunità politica. Però poi volevo osservare come una sorta di cattedra di osservazione e di riflessione sulla storia, no? Il Parlamento europeo. Poi però le mie donne me l'hanno proibito, madri, moglie, figlie, mi hanno detto no, ti proibiamo di andare in politica, cambiamo la serratura della porta.
I was tempted at the last European election because I think it's very important. Destiny of Europe is something which I really think very important. The destiny of the community, and it's a way to observe history. And but the women of my family prohibited me. They told me, let's change the locking of the door. And don't run into politics.
So they really reframed you from doing that.
Yes, but I don't know, maybe, you see, scusi, continuo in italiano. Io penso però che, io sono nato nel 1969, ho 51 anni. La mia generazione in Italia sicuramente, ma anche in buona parte d'Europa, è stata una generazione profondamente in politica, cioè nel senso che non ha fatto politica, no? A differenza di quelle precedenti.
I've been born in 1969, so I'm 51 years old. My generation was not doing politics.
Sì, le menti più brillanti della mia generazione non hanno fatto politica.
The most brilliant minds of my generation have not done politics.
E ne stiamo vedendo i risultati.
And we see the results of it now.
Io penso che ora, quando questa pandemia passerà, sono tentato nei miei giorni migliori dall'idea che le donne e gli uomini della mia generazione, che fino ad oggi non si sono dedicati alla politica attiva, ma ad altro, con le loro ultime forze, con le loro forze migliori, si dedichino alla cosa pubblica, ai destini collettivi, alla politica, per cercare di, come dire, di ricucire le ferite di questo nostro mondo, che saranno profonde.
I hope when the pandemic will be gone, I hope the women and men of our society, and especially those men and women of my generation that have not done politics, that didn't dedicate to politics, they will use their last forces and their best forces to get finally involved in the public thing, in the destiny of the public, in a way to save, to repair the wounds of what has happened to democracy, to repair the wounds and to take care of the destiny of the public things.
So you think people have been lax in this regard, of your generation?
Pensa che sono stati lassisti?
Che sono
stati un po' lassisti, che hanno un po' lasciato andare?
Ma sì, in qualche misura sì. Fino alla generazione precedente tutto era politica. No, gli anni 60-70 c'è stata una politicizzazione radicale di ogni aspetto della vita umana. Tutto, anche il sesso, era politica. E poi all'altezza della mia generazione che si è affacciata al mondo negli anni '80 c'è stato un riflusso, un rifiuto di quella politicizzazione, di quella ideologizzazione di ogni aspetto della vita.
In a way, yes. Everything was politics in the generations, in the year 60, the 60s, the 70s, everything was politicized in a way. Even sex was politics. But then we got in the 80s what we call reflusso, so flowing back, and a kind of refusal of any ideologies.
Io dico che noi siamo stati condannati a vivere nel tempo della cronaca. Prego.
We have been condemned to live in times of chronicle, of telling the actuality.
So now having written the first book and the second book, I was wondering, the first book of M is from the age 1919 to 1925. What period does the second book describe?
Well, the second book describes a period that goes from 1925 to 1932. It's about the central years of the regime. Okay, when these young, violent, revolutionary, they become the men that they used to hate when they were younger. Okay, when they get into the buildings of power and the totalitarian state and so on. It's a book about politics. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The sadness of politics.
Because they get self-indulgent, as you would say?
Yes. Loro che hanno...
Sono autoindulgenti?
Sì. Diventano gli uomini che avevano odiato da ragazzi.
They become the men they hated when they were young.
Dopo aver predicato contro i vecchi politici del vecchio mondo che secondo loro andavano liquidati e spazzati via, diventano quei vecchi politici.
After preaching against the old politicians of the old world, of the ancient world, they became those politicians.
Mm-hmm. Il regime fascista in Italia eredita tutti i vizi della vecchia politica italiana.
The fascist regime gets all the vicious vices, all the evils of the Italian politics of the period before.
E in più aggiunge i propri vizi, quelli della violenza, della dittatura, della repressione violenta del dissenso, del militarismo.
And besides the vices of the older politics, they add violence, dictatorship, suppression,
mm-hmm.
Militarism too.
I have one more question of one of our viewers. It's Shane, and he asks, what are you currently working on?
Sorry, you must repeat because I didn't hear you.
A cosa stai lavorando ora?
Sto lavorando a rimanere vivo, diciamo.
I'm working to keep on being alive.
Però sto anche, la verità è che sto anche progettando il terzo volume di questa saga che racconterà la caduta, l'inabissarsi del regime negli orrori delle leggi razziali, della persecuzione degli ebrei, dell'alleanza con Hitler e della seconda guerra mondiale.
But I'm also planning the third volume of this saga, which is telling the fall of the regime in the horrors of the persecutions of Jews, alliance with Hitler.
How do you manage to keep your heads straight and sane, writing all these horrors and thinking about all these horrors while being closed up in your own life?
Questo per me è il lavoro di una vita. Vede? Io appartengo alla generazione più fortunata della storia dell'umanità.
This is the work of my life. I belong to the most lucky generation in the history of humanity.
Noi che siamo nati in Europa occidentale, nella seconda o terza generazione dopo la fine della seconda guerra mondiale, apparteniamo al pezzetto di umanità più ricco, più agiato, meglio nutrito, meglio vestito, meglio curato, più longevo, meglio nutrito che abbia mai calcato la faccia della Terra rispetto ad ogni altra epoca e a ogni luogo del pianeta.
We that have been born the second or the third generation after the Second World War, we belong to the richest, the most people with most ease, with better clothes, with better food, with the best food. We become older, and this is and the most regarding all other generations in history of humanity.
Eppure alcuni di noi sentono, forse proprio per questo, di avere il dovere di non dimenticare gli orrori, le sofferenze, le ingiustizie terribili che sono state perpetrate soltanto una o due generazioni prima di noi. Basta voltarci indietro e chiederne conto ai nostri genitori.
But just because of this, some of us think that we have that we must actually have the duty not to forget all the horrors, injustices, sufferings that our parents passed through.
Well,
anche perché non è, dico l'ultima cosa, non è un fatto di... Prego.
With this beautiful note, I would like to end our conversation. It's a very good realization that we should really be aware of what's happening right now. Thank you so much for your contribution to Crossing Border Festival. We love having you here, and we hope to see you again real soon. Bye-bye.
Yeah, let's hope so. Thank you. I hope that I explained myself. I don't know.
Yes, your English was perfectly understandable, and the translation of Gloria as well. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Thank you. See you soon.